Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, here we go, Josh.
All right. It's another Palme d'Or. I looked up our kind of history with Palme d'Or winners, and we've actually done an episode on the Palme d'Or winner for that year since Parasite. So that's 2019. It was Anatomy of a Fall last year, and then it was like Titan, I think the year before that.
Wait, slow down. Parasite, great. Go.
Of course. I mean, we kind of knew we were gonna see, talk about that at least. And then in 2020, they didn't have anything. They didn't have a festival, so there was no winner. And then 2021 is Titan.
Great.
2022, Triangle of Sadness.
Great.
So, yep, Swedish. And then Anatomy of a Fall last year.
Super great.
We talked about Justine Triet. So, yeah.
And now?
And now, Anora.
Super great. I'm so excited about this movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
I really am jazzed up about this movie. It's been a long time, and I knew a movie it always happens this time of year. A movie comes along and just gets me going. And this one got me going.
Yeah, I kind of thought I knew what to expect from this movie, but yeah, it definitely takes, especially from nowadays, like I didn't expect the sex scenes to be as quote unquote graphic as they are, just because like there's really not much sex in movies nowadays, and so that was different compared to other movies out and about right now. And then I also was not expecting the kind of like powerhouse performances that I saw. Mikey, Madison's character, is, I think, a complex character, but then also she does it justice by what she does on screen too. And the husband, he becomes her husband. Yvonne is the character's name. It's Mark Edelstein.
Very nice. Edelstein.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's spelled a couple different ways around, so I don't really know how to specifically say it. But yeah, I was expecting something else from his character, but I don't want to get into too many spoilers. But it seems like for me, the movie was kind of like two chunks of a movie. It's still the same movie, but it was like two chunks of a movie. So number one, did you expect that? And number two, did that bother you? Or was that a refreshing thing halfway through the movie?
Refreshing thing halfway through the movie. I was not expecting anything that I got. I don't remember if I saw a trailer. I don't remember knowing anything about it other than that she was a sex worker and that something with a Russian guy. And I assumed I understood what I was going in for. And then the first 45 minutes of the movie is happy. And it's a good time, and they're having a good time. There's little to no conflict. There's only conflict over like self-doubt or what she's going to do, or you're challenged by her life on some level, but that's a human being watching somebody that is a sex worker. So try not to be judgmental, but it comes into play on some level. And so I was waiting and I was like, this is not what I thought this was. I thought this was uncut gems with a Russian and a stripper. Like that's what I thought it was going to be. And in a way, it's that in reverse. It's not what I was expecting on any level. And I very quickly thought, well, this is like the real Pretty Woman story. Like this is what I think that Pretty Woman, the script, was before they turned it into what they turned it into, because apparently it was much more graphic in nature, much more rated R in nature. And then Gary Marshall came along and Gary Marshalled it, and then came along and got the people that he got, and it became this big hit. So I was like, oh, this is like a for real romantic comedy. This is like reality. And what it would be like if you were to date or have an extended dating time with the sex worker. This is what it would be. But I wasn't expecting the joy. I wasn't expecting the humor. I certainly wasn't expecting the humor when the tide turns. I thought for sure it was going to be bloody and ugly and your stereotypical gangster Russian people. You still, by the end of the film, don't know anything about his parents. You just know that they're uber rich. You don't know why they're rich. And in a way, I was like, wait, I'm a little embarrassed by how much I judged this just on first 15 minutes of it. I was like, oh, I wasn't judging her because I don't really believe I believe people can do whatever they want to do as long as it's legal and you leave me alone. I personally, I don't have any problem with it. Do what you got to do. That's not what this movie's about at all. So no, I wasn't expecting any of it. I was pleasantly surprised. I was happy to see happy people throughout the movie. And I knew the tide was going to turn. I just didn't know it was going to turn the way that it did. It became a realistic buddy movie, travel movie of what they do when they get married and what they do to get their marriage annulled and when everybody else in his life gets involved. I knew he was going to become that character that he was, because who, like, at his age has all that stuff and has a perspective of life. I knew he was going to turn out sort of the way that he did. He's still sweet and innocent and kind of, I felt bad for him at the end of the movie because he just didn't have a voice. And that to me was more fascinating. I thought he was going to turn into this ultra brat and be like, well, I don't care about her, blah, 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 blah. He just cared about what they thought. He just cared about how his life would progress from that point on. Yeah. And the way that Sean Baker goes around the subject matters by teaching us stuff without any judgment, it's just factual. When he says later on, he says, do you want to go down the hall to his room, to his bedroom? It still has Star Wars posters on the wall or whatever the posters were on the wall. Mm-hmm. That tells you something about that character right then and there without any judgment, just facts. And the situation she got herself into, I thought it was going to have grave consequences, and it does, but not the consequences that I thought it was going to have. So cheers, Sean Baker. Cheers.
Yeah.
Bravo.
I think this is not the first time he's focused on sex workers in his films. I mean, we talked about Florida Project and, Tangerine is a film he made back in 2015, all shot on iPhones when that was like super rare and super new. But he's always been a champion of independent film, independent filmmaking, and then also like underrepresented stories. And so in this movie, it seems like he bit off a good amount, but he also makes it dynamic, and he knows that there's going to be filmic things about the movie, but then he also really grounds it in the characters. And I do enjoy so many of the parallels that you see in the film. You don't realize that, you do realize early on that, like, they even call the Ivan character her whale, like, oh, you caught your whale, right. Or the meal ticket or whatever you want to call that. Right. But ultimately, then we all also find out that for Ivan, or Ivan, I guess, I don't know. Yeah, Vanya is his like shortened name or whatever, that his parents are his meal ticket. So there's a parallel there. And then you kind of see where the rubber meets the road, and what she's willing to do to stick with him is the same stuff that he's willing to do to stick with his parents. And this movie does a great job of playing on romantic tropes and romanticism and romance in a romance movie to make you think that there's hope for this couple. And then it brings you back down to earth when it comes to the reality of the situation. His parents are oligarchs. They're Russian oligarchs, because Russia is essentially a dictatorship that the people at the very top, they hand out businesses and industries to the people they like, and those people that they like get all the money from those, and then all the people underneath them get nothing. So that's how his parents are rich. It doesn't really matter what industry made them rich, but because they're just rich.
But didn't you get the impression that or I did at least, that they were some form of mob, some form of cruel and unusual human beings who did bad things to get money? That was the stereotype in my head. And the fact that they are just part of the system and that they just became rich because of their position in the world. Is that any better? Maybe not. But they're not breaking. But they're not. That is scary. But they're not breaking kneecaps, and they're not injecting horror into people's lives to make sure that they make a profit. At least not in this movie. You don't see that. Same with the people who are hired to take care of the situation. They are not bad people. They are just doing what they have to do to survive. And would they break your knees? Probably. Would they draw blood? Probably. But do they? They don't. And that to me is is a twist on a stereotype. It's a twist on what my thoughts were going. I thought for sure she was going to get punched a couple of times, at least once or twice. I thought, to keep her the submission where it needs to be. But how they handle that is so funny. It's so funny. And she's the strongest one in the room the majority of the time, at least until the mother shows up. And that's way later on in the film. And it's nice to see that the two women in the film are the strongest people in the film. Is Anora, Annie, in circumstances out of her control? Yes, she is. But she has handled it as strong as she possibly could via her years of being a sex worker, which can't be that much because she's only 23, the years of being on the street or whatever has happened to her in her life, because you don't see a family. I believe you see her sister, but I'm not sure if that's her biological sister or that's just a sister in a roommate, that they call sisters, that kind of thing, because their relationship's a little, you can't interpret it fully. Did you bring milk home? That's kind of what a sister would say to a sister. And then she's like, is there milk in the refrigerator? Then no, I didn't bring it home, which is something sisters would say to each other. But the way that they handle, I'm leaving, Tuesday, I'll be back. She goes, it is Tuesday. And she goes, like, figure it out. I'll be back next Tuesday. That's more a roommate, what are you in my personal business type of conversation. Not that that's what that was, but I just love the fact that the women in this film are the strongest people in the film. Not that the men are weak and not that the men are subservient or anything like that. It's just that when the two women who are the primary women in this film, when they speak, that's it. And so I do have a question, since we started at the beginning, obviously. Was Annie, Anora, did she fall in love? Did she love him? Is she just being a companion, a concubine? Is she truly wanting to be married to him because she has feelings for him? Or was that just the solution to all of her problems? See, to me, it felt like, at first, obviously, it was Pretty Woman's situation. Offered her $10,000, and she made a deal for 15, and he said you could have made it 30, and she's like, oh, which is actually kind of similar to that scene in Pretty Woman, sort of. And at that point, she's just a companion. She's just a person.
It's a business transaction.
It's a business transaction. But then throughout that week that they start to spend together, they get very intimate with each other, and they become very cuddly and intimate in a different kind of way. Now, yes, can a person who's hired to please you be also your spoon and also your cuddler? Sure. But for some reason, something in the middle of that week changed for me, where I thought she had genuine feelings for him, more so than I ever thought he had genuine feelings for her.
I think it was that moment where she starts giving him sex tips, where she's like, hey, if you do it like this, it's probably going to be a little bit better. Yeah. Because if it was literally a transactional thing, and if it was something where she's like, let's get this over with, then she would have never given him any tips. It's an outward way of her showing that she cares for him in a different way than she would just care for a guy who's paying her to have sex with him. So I think that's kind of maybe the first indicator. And then at a certain point, there's an opportunity, there's wow, this is so much better. And we get to see her living, in her apartment with the window open and the elevated train going by, and then sitting out front and smoking. And it's just like, because initially you see her in the strip club, and, it's glamorous, I guess. I mean, strip clubs seem very stressful to me. I don't, because there's this weird, like, everybody's lying to everybody thing, where it's like, you think that I care about you and I don't. It's very weird.
I'm going to stop you there.
Are weird.
I have a problem with even being in the same exam room as somebody in the hospital and just that sheet. So I don't know. I mean, the guy would have to be super hot, and I would have to be super into it to forget that there's just this little curtain. And if you lean back, you can pull the curtain. Every time the nurse or somebody in the hospital goes, do you want the curtain pulled? Yes. And I also don't want anybody on either side of me, and I don't want you to stand in front of the curtain like that's a wall and I can't hear you. So yeah, it's just not my thing.
Yeah, but there's a movie-based glamour associated with the strip club and with the women all dolled up and all the makeup and the crazy hair and all that stuff. And then you go into she's drooling on her pillow and all that stuff. So we get to see that obviously, even if someone is glamorous, there's still the times when they're not. And so she gets to at least be close to a place where there's amazing opportunities, great views, ability to fly to Vegas on a whim. All of that stuff just opens up, like her whole kind of life possibilities open up to her when she meets Vanya, and she probably doesn't want it to end. And maybe she sees somebody who she can help to, stand up to his parents and all that stuff. Like, maybe he needs just a little push to get out of the nest and then he'll start flying.
I realized I don't know whether or not she's fallen in love with him. They fall in love with each other. They're infatuated with each other. He's a young man who probably has a lot more future with somebody else, and he's just having fun. I'm not sure. But the thing that I thought later on is that when you give somebody something and then you drastically and dramatically try to take it away from them, just you trying to take it back from them is going to make a person go, no, that's mine. And so I think that her being told by them this is what she's going to do. She's obviously not been told what to do for a long period of time. Obviously, she has to do things to get by. And because she says that to the club owner, or I guess the manager or whoever, as soon as you give me this, this, and this, healthcare, blah, 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 401k, and all that other stuff, then you can tell me when I'm going to work and when I'm not going to work. So she has strong sensibilities about what she wants in parameters of what she has to do. And so I think that the parents just telling them all of a sudden they can't be married bothers her maybe more than her feelings towards him. And I think when they tell her or they tell them and he runs away, because that would have ended the feelings for me. I'd have been like, okay,
yeah, right?
Yeah, you're dumb.
Jeez.
You're dumb. I mean, I get it, and it adds for a great cinematic experience. But I mean, that's I'm surprised somebody did say along the lines he ran away, but they didn't say to her, you're going from place to place. You're freezing to death on the Jersey Shore, and wearing that scarf you were tied up with, which has a very funny ending, in my opinion. I loved that. I was like, that scarf is, a supporting character, in my opinion. But she's the one doing the right thing. She's the one trying to find this guy. She technically doesn't have to do any of that. I mean, technically, she doesn't have to do anything.
Well, they need to know where she is. That's
sure.
it.
I mean, they need to know. And then you find that out later on that they have to be together when they're actually signing the papers. But technically speaking, if she walked away, they would still have to find him. I mean, sure, they would have to find her. Absolutely. If they wanted to sign the annulment papers, because they keep stressing that it was an annulment, not a divorce. There is nothing conventional about this film, except for it tries to be as conventional as it possibly can be, but yet it's still subversive on some level. It still subverts your expectation of what you're seeing. And I love that. I don't care if the acting was great, which it is, by the way. I don't care if the narrative was great, which it is. And, it's very simple in a way. What I love is that when I left the theater, nothing I was thinking, even while I was watching it, happened. It did not, because I can usually go, okay, that's going to happen, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. It doesn't ruin the experience. It's just after seeing movies as much as we do, you kind of have a sixth sense on some level. None of that happened with this film. I wasn't expecting anything that I got, and I loved that.
You were talking about how you got the Uncut Gems vibes. I do have that written down. It does get into Uncut Gems territory. But what it really felt like to me was Barry. Was the TV show Barry on HBO.
Interesting.
And it does have similar themes where it's humor being put in non-humorous situations with high stakes. Now, there's actually lower stakes in this movie than there is in the show Barry, but It's no, there it is. I mean, I would
No,
say
I'm
that,
not saying. I'm just saying
but
Barry is.
Barry is pretty extreme. Yeah,
Woo.
yeah, very extreme. But I got that same like riding the rail of tone on this movie where I do feel like Sean Baker, it really stuck his neck out a bit because the humor that happens once we start incorporating in the henchman is it could fall flat or it could feel forced or corny, but it doesn't. It gets into screwball comedy territory, which I love screwball comedies, and it's done well and done with the actors who I don't know if English is their native language, but they're still able to convey comedy in some of their line readings, and then their ability to transition back and forth between languages and utilizing language for jokes and things like that. And it's funny because the trailer doesn't tell you anything about the humoristic portions of the film, and it really helps to re-energize the film at that point, because once we lose Vanya and it's her interacting with those guys, it's a totally different movie for me, and it becomes like a road movie essentially. And we get into that, like, go from place A to place B to place C. Oh, we got to stop at a diner to eat some food, that kind of a thing. So it's one of those things where that really I felt energized when that started happening. Yeah, and so that was exciting to see how he can kind of like turn the gears of filmmaking and change our outlook on the film and change our expectations on the film on the fly. And so he's great at that. Did you know that he not only wrote and directed this movie, he cast the movie? He did have a casting assistant, but there is no casting director credited in the movie. But there is a credit that says like, it's like casting by, it doesn't say casting director, it says like casting by Sean Baker. And he also edited this movie too, which is not rare for him, but it's rarer nowadays for filmmakers to do that. You still have Steven Soderbergh and you still have filmmakers out there that do their own editing, but it seems like Sean Baker is really focused on making independent film, shooting on film, shooting in traditional, like he used anamorphic lenses with this. It's a wider aspect ratio for the film, and so I think that he's really trying to, and from some of the articles I've read, he's really trying to make it so that people understand you can make a film that's interesting, it's exciting, that looks good, and is not expensive, and it can win the Palme d'Or and probably get nominated for a Best Picture award, and you don't have to spend $100 million, and it doesn't have to be about the creation of the atomic bomb or what, like it can be smaller stories, and it can be closer to people, and it doesn't have to be huge. And maybe you don't have to shoot it on an iPhone, but you can still shoot it on film potentially, and then make it work, and then make it accessible to people. So
a lot of that stuff comes down to the basic stuff is in place. The narrative is in place. The story's in place. The characters are in place. They're well written. They're extremely well acted. He has a point of view. He has a thumbprint. He knows what he wants from the shot. So how he gets that, if that means he has an editor and a producer and a casting director and all that other stuff, and it works out, then great. But you're absolutely right. None of that stuff matters if that other stuff is not in place. The film can look great. It can be produced really well. It can be acted really well. But if your narrative's not in place and you don't have a point of view, he has a very particular point of view. And he does in all his other films too, although I've only seen 2 other ones. So I don't really know, but I can tell.
What are the 2 that you've seen?
I've seen Tangerine, but I can't really remember it, which is weird, but I know I've seen it. And I saw The Florida Project, of course.
All right. Yeah, I didn't know if you'd seen Red Rocket. That came out like in the pandemic.
I want to. And when I saw that in his bio, I was like, oh, damn, yeah, I wanted to see that.
I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah, I will see that. So all of that stuff, as long as you have a strong point of view and you have something to say, and you have an idea of how you want to say it, that goes so much further than all that other stuff. So he takes on a lot, but I think it's because he wants it to look like this. He wants it to sound like this. He wants it to be perceived like this. He wants his point of view to come across. So if he's going to edit his own films, which to me, I don't know how extensive of a process or how hard of a process that is, but if he knows what he wants, it makes sense that it comes as clear as this does.
Let's get into spoilers. I think we should get into spoilers. Spoilers from now on.
So I got a couple of questions. How do you say Igor's name in real life? Do you have that pulled up by any chance? The actor?
Yuri Borisov.
Okay, Borisov. Okay. The heart and soul that young actor puts into that performance is stunning. The moment you see him look at her,
Them sitting on the couch.
Yes.
I loved that. And then the mirror later on in the film.
Kill to be in scene like that. Just even if it was just for 2 minutes, my life would feel satisfied and I would be okay. There is something about quiet communication that you can really only get on film. That said, I did see Jessica Lange on Broadway, and she did do a whole 15-minute scene by herself without saying a word. So,
wow.
Dude, like, I wanted to scream, "Are you kidding me?" halfway through it. Like, I just couldn't believe it. But I mean, it's Jessica Lange, so she didn't say a word, not a word. Maybe you heard her light her cigarettes, you heard her sort of mumbling, not even really mumbling to herself, and it was a whole scene just by herself. So silent communication in film is an easier way to get it across, obviously, than on a Broadway stage, unless you're Jessica Lange, unless you're in that particular play. And I'm sure many people have done that on stage and in theater and that stuff. But silent moments on film are essential to a degree, but hard to pull off. Most people have to say something. Most people have to put in some kind of sound cue, some kind of something to indicate to the audience this is going on. And you know from the moment that Igor looks at her that the end is going to play the way the end is going to play. You know from that.
You knew that early
my
on?
Heart.
Man, I felt like he was just a heavy. And so it did a lot for me to open the film up to me as it went on to this character changing. And it was more effective to me than just being than that immediate like, this is the guy, this is who the movie's about.
I'm not sure. I had an instinct and I was hoping, and at first I was like, and then that great scene where he's holding her down, although she's on top of him.
Yes.
He's
restraining her.
He's restraining her. Yes. She has choice words for that later on. And I see it from her point of view too. But the other guy, what's the other guy's name? Garnick.
Yeah, Garnick is played by Vache Tovmasyan.
You sound like me trying to pronounce it. You sound like me sounding like you trying to pronounce it. So
I need my sister here. She knows Russian.
Does she?
Yeah.
That's amazing. When he pulls out, when he goes to the freezer to find something to put on his nose, and it's not ice, and it's not peas, and it's not a steak.
What is that?
I think it's ravioli, mini ravioli, because I've been trying to figure out what it was in my head, and I was like, okay, tortellini, I'm fine with that, but they look like little raviolis.
Yeah,
and the look on his face, like, okay, this will do. I laughed so loud at that. I think people turned and looked at me like, what the hell was so funny? And I was like, this is such a cliche scene in a movie, and yet Sean Baker has found a new and original way to tell that story, that it's not peas and it's not steak and it's not ice and it's not like a drink, where you fill up whiskey or bourbon and you drink some and then you put it on your head. That's been done before. And he makes it a little thing where he goes, okay. And then when he's on the couch and he's going, be careful.
He's like, don't do
dangerous. It. Yeah, don't do
that.
Don't get too close. I was laughing so hard because that guy's in pain, first of all.
Yep.
And I knew that the sensibility of those two guys were going to be completely different than what I was expecting from that point on. The way that he was holding her, restraining her, with her being on top of him, it had a seriousness to it. He was restraining her. He stopped her because she basically almost beat the hell out of him. At least she beat the hell out of the place, that's for sure, being taken down. And they were like, yeah, we weren't expecting this from you. And I think it's kind of like a visual metaphor for her character, that she's not what you're expecting her to be. She's just not. And so don't do it. Don't get too close. I was laughing so hard. And the way that Igor is holding on to her, he moves his head a couple of times to get out of her way, obviously, so she can't hit him. But there's a sensitivity and a kindness, for lack of a better word, that he has. And I was like, this guy is something special. It's either the actor or the character or both. And I will venture out to say that I think that this movie is going to be nominated for a bunch of Oscars. And I think he's going to be the surprise Best Supporting Actor. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I hope so. He's so great. He's so
good.
Sweet. And just the way he wipes his mouth when he's eating, there's something very genuine about him. And I just thought, this guy, whatever this guy has, and it might be just a star making role, it could be that's what this is. He's a very good looking guy. He's got those piercing blue eyes, but there's good looking people. There's a quality about him that last scene would not have worked if he had not presented it throughout the whole movie. And if they gave the other guy, Garnick, if they had given just one more scene, I bet you both of them would be nominated for the Oscar. If he had one more tell the spoiled brat a story, like this is happening because, and he sort of has that, but not, it's more a statement about how he's sick of having to deal with his boss having to deal with this guy. And I also thought the boss guy was good too.
Toros, played by Karin Karagulian.
So great when he
was
doing
in
the baptism.
Tangerine.
Was he? Who's he?
Yeah, he played something in Tangerine. I don't know what he played.
Those are the kind of movies that I'm halfway through watching again, and I go, oh, I've seen this. And then I start to pick up on people that I recognize from other things. And then, because I'll go back and watch Tangerine, because I'm almost 100% sure I've seen it. And it's terrible that I can't remember. I think it has to do with, one, we see a lot, and two, sometimes movies don't stick for me always the first time. And maybe that's a little bit to do with, I don't know what that's to do with. It just happens sometimes to me. I don't know why. Like, I could tell you sort of what happened in the Florida Project, but not really. I could tell you bits that happened in the Florida Project, maybe not the whole narrative, if you will.
Anyway, similar. Yeah.
Back to these actors. So Mikey Madison, she is in Better Things. Do you remember that show I was telling you about? Pamela Alden. Look her up. You know who she is.
I know Pamela Alden. Yeah.
She is the oldest daughter of hers in that show. And we actually have talked about her before, just my love for that show. And there was a celebration of Mikey's character. It's not Mikey in Better Things. And they do this improvisational dance thing for her as a celebration, I think, of her 18th birthday. And it's out of nowhere and it's very surreal. That show is very special. Better Things, it's special. And Mikey Madison is a standout. All three of the daughters are standout. She's also in Once Upon a Time in... Yeah.
That's where I remember her from.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I've seen her most recently. And I mean, I know she's been in she was in Scream, the 2022 version of Scream, but I didn't see that. But yeah, she, and Sean Baker talks about it in some of the interviews I've heard him. He's like, she essentially stole the last 10 minutes of the movie. She's getting her head bashed in by Brad Pitt and somehow she makes it hilarious. I don't know how you do that, but she does it.
What's that expression? They knew the assignment. You see that posted online all the time. You see a character and an actress and they go, so-and-so knew the assignment. She knows the assignment, and she's going to be Oscar nominated. She's a front runner at this point. I don't know how the Academy is going to accept this film. I don't really care. I mean, the Academy has come far when it comes to judging people. I look at Poor Things. Yeah. In a way, it's sort of... It's kind of less than that.
Dang, geez, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of less. And that's why I keep wondering about this sexless movie thing. I keep seeing a lot of people having sex in movies, and I'm like, but I'm watching a lot of streaming stuff, so I get confused.
That's TV shows. That's
not
movies.
That's
I'm talking
why
about the theatrical film.
Yeah.
There's, I've seen a couple of different articles, and people have gotten really granular with the analysis, and it's like, okay, I mean, that's probably
Well,
true. Yeah.
hopefully it comes from the fact that if there is a sexually motivated scene, I hope it's essential to the narrative. And that's a very, very fine line. What you
Yeah.
might think is essential to the narrative, I might not think it's essential to the narrative. Like, I think the opening of this movie, it sets out what the movie is, and it says to you, this is what the movie's about. It reminded me of, remember the opening of Nocturnal Animals with that art exhibit
Yes.
of the people who were not wearing much clothes, and they were not your traditionally younger in shape type models, and it set a tone for the movie. And I think Sean Baker sets this movie up purposely with that opening shot. It's exactly what it should be. This is exactly the world you're going to be in, and this is not a bad thing if that's what you're into. It sets up a tone. There's never this seedy, degrading, horrible way that they treat women. I'm sure that's there, but that's not what this movie is about. The women are the strongest characters in this movie, and I think that's essential to this storytelling. So anyway,
I think you're right, and I think that does play into the end. Anora has figured out how to survive, and this is one thing she can strip, and she can give lap dances, and she can go out with those guys later on, and
she's a salesperson.
They'll pay her to have sex. Exactly. She is selling a product, and the product happens to be her body and her companionship. That's it. Which is why the end, and I'm sure we'll get to the end, but that's why the end is so poignant, is that the problem is that her product is so close to herself, like to her emotional center, to her emotional core, that she's closed off that part of herself to other people. And so she doesn't know how to reckon with that. And she may have felt like she was starting to open it up to someone, but she didn't know how to. She married a guy who paid her tens of thousands of dollars to be around him. So that whole relationship started off with a transaction. I'm sure that there's people, sex workers out there, or strippers, or whoever out there, who've been happily married to someone who they met while they were at their job. But in this particular instance, that was not the case. So she's now, by the end of the film, having to figure out how to be able to thank someone. She can't even thank Igor. She cannot say thank you. It's not happy, but maybe it's the beginning of something that could become happy.
Yeah, because I think, okay, before we get there, a few more things about Mikey Madison really quick, if you don't mind. There is a scene when they go to Vegas and they lose like $22,000, right? And
in one, he just goes all in. Ooh.
Yeah. And which is always like a scene in a gambling movie, right? And they're always losing, or it doesn't matter if they lose or win. It's always that like grab the big chips on the table. Mm-hmm. And there is a shot of her where she goes through a gamut of emotions in like 30 seconds, where she goes from what? $22,000 to, oh, well, okay. Wow. That doesn't even do it justice. Sorry. But the fact that Sean Baker was in tuned, and that might've been written, but the fact that he was in tune to his actress or actors enough to know that there needed to be a reaction shot, because the audience is going, $22,000, what? And we've seen this a million times in films. How do you convey that same $22,000 thing? It's all in her eyes. It's so subtle and so nuanced. The scene when she's eating it in the diner is so, it's just, almost cussed. It's really good acting. It's just nuanced in a way that I think only in this movie, only in that moment could she have done it like that. I'm sure other actors can pull off 1,000 different things that she does. That's not the point, because at first you think she's like, hey, you guys don't, I'm get off my car. You think she's that character. Yeah. You think she's that character, and she is.
Or Brooklyn accent, I guess I should say. Yes. Yeah.
Right, but they go to Jersey though, because that's
They
the
do go to Jersey.
Yeah, that's Atlantic
It's
City. There,
close. Yeah.
right? Yeah,
But she lives in Brooklyn, and
right.
she is a
Yeah,
Brooklyn
that's right,
girl, but
because she takes the thing. But he starts, and that's another ode to Sean Baker. He shows her day ending when our day begins, and that's been done before, but the subtleties and the way that she handles it, she's kind of asleep but kind of awake, it's nuanced in a way I hadn't seen before. So if she is celebrated with an Oscar nomination, and if she's celebrated by winning the Oscar, she will hands down deserve it. No doubt about it. I'm hoping that it goes straight down the line. I'm hoping screenplay, which it could win because of its originality of something that's been told before. Director, picture, supporting actor, actress. I hope it goes straight down the line.
Well, and it would be good to, I mean, for original screenplay. I mean, I think that's where I think the Oscars do get it right, because they do have original and adapted, and there's so many things that are adapted nowadays that a truly, genuine original screenplay is a good original screenplay is tough and rare. Now, what about the fact that they do a lot of improvisation in Sean Baker's films? Because his whole thing is do a lot of research, have an outline, have a structure, have a beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and then get there. And
I can.
How does that work
tell.
with screenplays? It just seems a little bit backwards. But
well, I guess. But the other thing that we talk about, and maybe a lot of people don't know about, the screenplay is not necessarily just the words, though. The screenplay has to do with the actions. It has to be sunny day on the beach and up comes the sun on the, that's all part of the screenplay.
Or even
and
the fact that they went to Vegas and like they had that they couldn't have improv going to Vegas. Like that was in the screenplay that they went to Vegas.
Sure.
So, but
it's
like
also
said,
in the screen, and I don't know how this is looked upon, and I don't know how this is judged. But the screenplay's opening on a dark day. You ever seen The Player with Tim Robbins?
Yes.
And the mourners, it's raining, and the umbrellas, and blah 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 blah. How that is shot versus how that reads on the page, I think is part of it. I don't know how people who vote on the screenplay actually look at that. I don't know if that's a committee. I never know the rules. And when I go to look at the rules, it's so damn confusing. I don't have any fun with it. So I'm like, I don't want to know. So I don't know if that's a committee, like the documentary thing. I don't know if you have to have.
Well, it's weird that you say that, because the screenwriting would be judged on by other screenwriters, but documentary is a different thing, I think, because I know it's a group of people from the Academy across all different disciplines that are have to go to screenings. And
so I think it's like when they see that shot of the sun rising or whatever it is, the umbrellas, the rain, whatever it is, they know that was scripted and he got what he wanted visually from off the page. So to answer your question, I can understand how somebody would say, "Oh, how does that add to the screenplay if it's improv?" Well, what about the Celine song?
Perfect. No, not Perfect Strangers. Crap. Now you got me doing it.
Yeah, right. Perfect.
I was going to talk about that earlier.
It's not perfect.
No, it's not perfect. Past Lives.
Past Lives.
I didn't even look it up.
Yeah, good for you. It would have taken me way longer. But anyway, because I get so excited about the reference, I kind of forget that I'm not making reference to the reference and people should just fill in the blanks, which is totally lazy. Past Lives, the carousel scene didn't exist on page. So does that hurt the original screenplay idea, or does it add to the original screenplay idea? I was
gonna bring that up earlier. You were talking about how the actor's not even speaking, and conveying that emotion back and forth, like that is Past Lives. That's all of their interactions as adults.
And
when he's
walking
visiting
to the
her.
cab at the end,
or in the bus, like holding hands like very close to each other,
and the husband at the bar. Ugh.
Yeah,
I have been putting off seeing that again. I cannot. it's not a bad experience. It's a touching experience. And I'm an emotional person, so I'm just even getting emotional thinking about it right now because it's such a beautiful movie. But anyway, so does that count against the original screenplay? You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
I think the idea that you're trying to film a scene on the New Jersey, Atlantic City boardwalk, and all of a sudden the sun goes down. Do you stop it? Do you continue going on? Oh, this has to happen in the daylight because you got to see the scarf going around her neck. Speaking of this movie, Anora, does that matter? Did you convey what you needed to convey with the carousel from past lives? Did you convey what you needed to convey with the nighttime sky of Atlantic City and her putting the scarf around? So the intention and the meaning behind the scene is conveyed regardless if it's exactly like what you have written, because unless you're doing Shakespeare, and they mess around with that all the time on screen. Unless you're doing a fully adapted version of a play, which they do, but they sort of mess around with things like that too. I think it's about what you got on screen. So if the screenplay says he puts on a black hat and he puts on a green hat instead, he still puts on a hat. And there's a reason why he's putting on the hat. I just made that up. No movie in particular. So, I mean, it'd be fun to see how close. Well, I have read quite a few scripts that have been transposed into movies, and I read Good Will Hunting. And there's a bunch of different things that are in that script that did not make it to the movie and vice versa. And they want original screenplay because the heart, the soul of the movie is on screen. That's what matters, at least to me.
Well, you know, one of the other parallels that I saw was the fact that the henchmen were very similar to the sex worker, you know, were very similar to Anora and the other sex workers, where it's kind of like they have an allegiance to their boss, but really their allegiance to their boss is only as much as they give them money.
Right.
And that's it. That's where it ends. And it's like, and you could definitely see that when Anora was going off on those guys, and they're like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And they were kind of like, no, I'm not gonna, I still have my rules and my regulations, and that's what I'm gonna, you know, go by. So that's where I stop. And that's, I think, a little bit different from, you know, the fact that these are henchmen for an oligarch versus them being mobsters who grew up in a family, and there's an expectation of that. These are guns for hire at a particular level, and they've got families, which, I mean, we obviously know that Toros has a family because our introduction to him is him having to leave a baptism.
When he started to answer the phone and the baby was in his hands, I was like,
oh, everybody in the theater was like, no, don't do that. Don't get your phone.
I thought he was going to hand the baby over at that moment.
No,
he doesn't hand the baby over until just
checking it. You know.
Yeah, no, he had to pull up his whole thing that he was wearing. Speaking of conclave and everything everybody wears in church, he had to pull it all the way up, and I was like, "What? Oh, this is not only funny because it was funny. It's a statement about where we're at in society and the fact that he has to answer this phone when this particular client or boss calls, and that's it. Even God has to take a sidestep for, you know, a side seat, if you will, for, you know, the Russian guy or the wife or the woman who's in charge of.
She was on the phone. She was the one yelling at him.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm like, we're gonna meet her. I know it. And this is not gonna go well when she's around. And it doesn't. Although, and maybe I'm interjecting this, she is definitely very harsh to Anora, and very disrespectful and purposefully harsh. And I get that. There is an ounce of, I respect you for standing up for yourself just a little bit, but you're still going to do what I want you to do no matter what. There is a little bit there. It might have been nicer if they played a little bit more into it, but I think she's supposed to be your stereotypical heavy, controlled person, the boss. She's supposed to be that person, and she is, because she terrifies me.
she's the opposite of a doting mother. She
Yeah.
is not a doting mother. She is a mother who's annoyed by her son's inability to just be an adult who she doesn't have to deal with his crap all the time.
He's
And
20 something years old and he's had more money than God his whole entire life. What
and she
did they
probably
expect?
she may not have parented him in a way that allowed for him to see what that would look like, but either way he should still be an adult. So but it's ultimately, I could even see if like a mother's like, no, he's my little angel and he can't go off
Oh,
with
no.
someone. No, it's the opposite of that. It's the, you know how dumb this kid is? Like, you need to get out of here. We're
Well,
gonna give
she
you
also
10 grand and get out of here.
just like what's the guy we were just talking about in the church, Toros?
Toros,
Yeah, he says that. He was like, I've been having to deal with you since you were, such and such an age and blah, blah, blah. So she's been having to deal with this kid his whole entire life. This is just, I think he's taken it one step way past what they've ever had to deal with. Okay, so because we're going on almost an hour now, let's get in the talk about the last scene, because I think we should touch base on that, and then we'll
yeah.
stop
I mean, so
with
what
Annie.
did you? I thought that the ring, the stringer of the ring, was a great ending, and seeing, having him save the ring, and that's like her. $10,000 isn't a lot to the Russian oligarchs, but they think that $10,000 is like an insane amount of money to her, but it's not.
So
And
let me ask you a question
yeah.
really quick about that. That $10,000 that they give her at the end is the $10,000 he promised her, or he gave her $10,000 and then she's going to get another $10,000?
No, it's $10,000 total, but that ring, if it's a 4-carat ring, there was a thing on there that said like it's going to be $180,000.
Yeah, I figure
like
it's
that.
about $200,000. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a much larger payout, whatever you want to call it, for her troubles.
Yeah.
So that's once again Igor being a good guy, getting her bags out of the back of the car, taking them up the stairs for her.
I love him. I love everything about that character. I just did. So the ending was, I was waiting for something like that to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I knew she was going to have to. She was not going to have to. She was going to have some form of a breakdown. I just didn't know when. And I was hoping that when it happened, it was because of her inability to control the situation, not through abuse and submission and her being beat the hell out of and her being treated poorly because she's a sex worker. I was hoping it wasn't that, and it's not that. And so I think the ending is simultaneously sad, because what happens is, obviously when she has a breakdown like that, you can't say that's the happiest moment of her life. Of course it's sad, but it brings the reality of her life into perspective, that we're thinking we're watching a really vivid, realistic version of Pretty Woman, when we're actually watching how tough her life is. Her life is tough, and she seems to handle it, and she seems to know what she's talking about, but she's still very young. I mean, she's 23. That is so young. And so I was expecting her to have a breakdown. I just wasn't expecting, for me, what my interpretation was, that she had an emotional connection to him and did not know she had that strong of an emotional connection to him. Then she did what she normally does with a guy, and she normally just has sex with him and then moves on. I don't think that she was expecting the emotional release that happened when she had sex with him at that moment, for the intimacy between somebody that she felt chemically something with. She has a thing with that guy, whether or not it's defined or not. And I was also super glad, because I was like, they have a thing. They have a thing. Like, they better put, they have a thing. Like, is anybody seeing, is this just me being wishful thinking, naive Paul, who like wants a happy ending? They have a thing. And that ending proves that they did. And the way he handles it is so sweet. He allows her to be in charge of the whole event. You don't think so? You don't think so? Why did you?
Okay, so here's what I saw. I saw him do a selfless thing for her, completely selfless, and She even makes fun of his car, and it's his grandpa's car. And speaking of that, during this whole scene, you have the sound design, which is amazing, which is two elements. It's the idling diesel engine of that car
Yeah.
and the windshield wipers.
Yeah.
And
So great.
and it's just like such an amazing sound bed for this. And then so she, instead of getting out of the car and saying like "smell you later," she goes and tries to thank him, tries to sincerely thank him. But instead of saying thank you, or instead of saying, "Hey, let's get a drink sometime, there's a thing here," she gravitates towards the only thing that she knows how to do when interacting with other men, or when interacting with men, which is, "I'm going to give you sex, but I'm not even going to charge anything for it." And when she does that, she does take charge and she does initiate the interaction, and they're both getting something out of it, but at the same time it's to a certain extent somewhat clinical, because this is what she does, is like her profession, part of her profession. The moment that he reaches up and grabs her head to bring it closer to his to kiss him, she struggles and pulls back and really tries to fight it, to the point where she does not give in. And then at that moment she breaks down, because that's too scary, because she can make herself vulnerable in many, many ways to men. But the fact that she's not even able to say that she, for me, the fact that she gravitated towards having sex with him at that moment, instead of, I don't know, just saying thank you. And when it got too real, when he tried to kiss her and she couldn't handle that, that was too much. To me, it just seemed like her interactions with men have been skewed so much, because we don't see her in a relationship with a man, an actual relationship.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what her history is with that, but it just seems like she's going through a lot, and she needs someone, and he's there to be there for her, but it seems like she's resisting his availability, and the fact that she doesn't have to pay him. She doesn't have to pay him back. That's difficult for her because she doesn't know how that works. It's a very transactional relationship. Every relationship with another man is very transactional. So this is new to her, and in a difficult time, and probably coming at a good time, but really messy. And so it just felt very non-lovey-dovey to me, and very just grounded and difficult.
I never said it was lovey-dovey, first of all. Second of all, I agree with you 100%. That's exactly where I would have gone with the rest of what I was saying.
Good.
No, I think the fact that she can't control him at that moment where he's trying to kiss her, and the fact that he feels something stronger and she feels it too, she can't control that feeling. Mm-hmm. That's why she has an emotional breakdown, because she's never felt that kind of intimacy with somebody, period, let alone after sex, let alone after somebody she was trying to say thank you, let alone trying to make a transaction with. It turns out she has feelings, maybe not towards him per se, but she has feelings other than just transactional sex. You had a good time, I had a good time, thanks for the money later. And also, what I loved about it was that it wasn't a breakdown of everything that she's been through. It was a breakdown of that moment. She didn't have a breakdown because the whole escapade of looking for her now ex-husband. Mm-hmm. She didn't have a breakdown because she didn't get what she wanted. She didn't have a breakdown because she was tired. She didn't have a breakdown because she flew across country twice, or however long she flew across country in that 7-day period of time, because she flies across Vegas and then comes back, and then she flies across again. And I mean, as you well know, flying is not that easy to do, especially across the country.
I mean, in a private plane, it's probably not bad. But,
well, that's true. That's true. But still, I mean, it's not, it's taxing. And I'm sure you're right. It's better in a private plane. And maybe I just don't know what that is, so I don't even think about that.
I don't either.
So she's not having a breakdown after all of this stuff happened to her. She's having a breakdown because she's feeling connected to somebody she wasn't expecting to feel connected to. And she doesn't know how to process that emotion. She's processed every emotion up to this point. She's never even thought about processing an emotion, if you will, but up to this point, and plus the kindness and the generosity and the sweetness that he has for her, that comes across throughout the whole entire movie. So she's connecting to that. She's feeling that. So I agree with you. I don't think it's a uplifting, happy, yay, we're going to live forever. And, you know, I'm going to meet you on the side of your balcony. I'm going to crawl up and I'm going to put a flower in my mouth and I'm going to give it to you. And Gary Marshall is going to pull the camera back and everybody lives happily ever after. It's not that at all. And maybe Sean Baker didn't mean this, but I think it's a moment where whoever is watching it, their interpretation of that moment is the right interpretation. Does that make sense? So I agree with you 100%. It is not a happy ending. It's not the most upbeat ending, but there is hope in my opinion, but I'm always looking for hope.
There's a path forward. I think that's the key.
Yes, there's a path forward. Maybe not between them two, and maybe they'll somehow be friends or have some kind of connection. The connection might not be what we think it should be as an audience member, but there's a connection there, and she's felt a connection to somebody, a genuine connection to somebody, and it's handled so brilliantly, and this is going to be one of my favorite movies of the year. Top 10 easily.
That's great. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I would say we could potentially end with a little bit of a observation I had when I was leaving the theater. There was a couple in front of me, and as they started walking to their car, there was a man and a woman. The woman said, "I just want to go home and go to bed." And like, I think that if the guy with her thought that after the movie, his girlfriend or wife or whoever would have said that, he would have been like, "Oh yeah." But the way that she said it, it was exactly the opposite. Yeah. It was the like, "I'm done," because it ends so abruptly. The film just like, boom, with it's got a little bit of a tail with the diesel engine and the windshield wipers, but then it's just boom. And the lights came up too, which I was like, whoa, they don't normally do that. There's normally a little bit of a kind of like, oh, let's kind of ramp in some score or something. Nope. Yeah. It is just boom, lights on, credits.
And I'm glad the impulse passed very quickly, but I wanted to stand up and go, yes! And I knew people would not understand why I did that. It had nothing to do with the ending. It had to do with, I had an experience watching this film. Yeah. And I was connected moment one, and I didn't think about my phone. I didn't think about anything else. I only thought about what I was watching when I was watching it. I mean, I had thoughts about what might happen and stuff like that, which turned out to be sort of not true, but kind of on point for what I was thinking. It just was a completely satisfying experience. I don't know if I could ever articulate or put words to why that is, but it was. So,
yeah, that's great. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. We're on X. We're at Actor Engineer, and just search for us on YouTube by searching the Actor and the Engineer podcast. We'll see you next time.